All right, so today we're going to be talking about the secret to closing more MRR that no one is talking about. Before I get started, let me just see a show of hands. How many guys are Galactic partners? Like, just to kind of look around. So guys, I just want to say thank you. Like, this has been one crazy experience getting this company started right in the middle of COVID and all of these different pieces that have happened. And I just wanted to say thank you to you guys. And for the rest of you, you're probably wondering, who the hell is Bruce McCullough and what does he know about growing MSPs? Well, you see, I've sat where you're sitting. I used to be running an MSP. I grew it to 8.5 million, and I sold it in 2019, right before COVID. And to give you some idea what our growth looked like, in 2019, we grew by 1.3 million in recurring revenue. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today isn't a theory. I'm not going through and telling you what I think. I'm going to be telling you things that I know work because of my own experience and experiences of the partners who just raised their hand. One of the ways that we had a lot of growth in 2019, and for a few years before that, we actually started this in 2016, is we were going into hospitals and recovering them from ransomware. Who here has dealt with ransomware? At this point, I think all hands should be up. Well, there's a few people in the back that have never heard of ransomware. Okay, Google it. And anyways, so we were going into these environments with an incident response team, and there's a couple of things that you have to know about recovering ransomware in hospitals. The first thing is you have to do forensics, like a tremendous amount of forensics, because you have to identify whether or not the attacker was able to exfiltrate any data, right? It's a big deal if the attacker takes medical records. And so we had a forensics team, and one of the things that we started to notice is we started to notice that when we would go into a hospital, and by the way, like, these were terrible events. These were not like events where a server got encrypted and they were able to recover it. An incident response team is expensive, and a hospital doesn't pick up the phone and ask for help unless shit went real sideways. So that's the type of environment we would go into. And what we started to notice is, of the ones that were being supported by MSPs, the lateral movement was much higher. The attackers were able to get to more things. The chances of the backups being spoiled were much higher. The chances of the backups being destroyed were much higher. And we started to realize that we had a problem. You see, attackers have a playbook that they follow when they see an MSP is servicing an environment. And what we decided to do is we decided that we were going to do something about this. And I sold my MSP, and I started a new mission to help protect 1 million people. And what we've done is we've started a company, Galactic, and we have a community. You saw that some of the hands go up, and we do 3 things for MSPs. We provide a stress-free third-party audit. As in, we're not coming to your clients trying to sell them anything. Most of the time when you guys have a third-party audit happen, you actually have a competitor that's going through and doing that work on the client's behalf. We're not a competitor. We have no interest in selling anything but audits. The other thing that we do is we provide you a blueprint to make sure that you reduce the risk inside your own MSP based on our findings inside of real events to allow you to be able to sleep better at night. And finally, we give you a simple, scalable way that you can use to turn ice-cold prospects and clients who don't want to invest into security-minded people who are interested in figuring out the right thing to do. And you're probably wondering, like, if I'm so interested in improving MSP security, why in the hell am I up here talking about sales? And here's the thing. If you guys go through and you build like the best security stack in the entire world, you get everything exactly right, you're going to put yourself out of business because you're going to cost more, and that's either going to be from the standpoint of operations or your client experience. Like, imagine, being that client that isn't really bought into security, and all of a sudden you have to go and ask somebody to run an application for instance, right? So that's an expense on the client experience side, or you're gonna cost more when it comes to licensing or support. So the bottom line is you're gonna come across people who are cutting corners, and you're going to need a way to make sure and differentiate and show them that your solution is actually better than what they're currently doing. So that's why we're talking about sales. And speaking of sales, are you guys familiar with cold calling? Yeah. Okay, let's see a show of hands. Who loves cold calling? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, we got 3 of you in the crowd. You need to talk to me afterwards because I need some help. But for the rest of you guys, why do you not like cold calling? When I was running my MSP, this was the last thing that I would do. It was the very last thing I would do. And I mean, I would rather clean my office than pick up the phone and make 100 freaking phone calls. Who's with me? Yeah, right? And so why is that? Well, it's because even though Robin and everybody tells us that it's great, like, selling isn't that fun, okay? I'm sorry, but it's just not that fun. And so what we're gonna talk about today is we're gonna talk about closing more MRR without having to sell. Because ultimately, if you can close more MRR without having to sell, it makes it so it's more fun for you, and believe it or not, nobody likes to be sold, so it's more fun for your clients and prospects. So I'm gonna assume a couple things today, and if you're new to our community, grab a pen and paper, because I'm gonna go through some things I'm gonna assume that you already have in place. If you're an existing Galactic client, these are things that you're probably gonna wanna make sure you already have in place too. So the first thing is I'm gonna assume that you have your ass in line. That's your advanced security stack. You have a solution that is separate from your normal managed services offering. So when you go and do a proposal, you have your essential IT or your basic managed services and your advanced security stack. I see a lot of you looking at me like, yeah, we got this. Okay, and I see some of you that I know don't have this done yet, shaking your head like, yeah, you got this. So this is something that I really want to make sure that you're doing. And the reason for this is because when you go in, if you go into a competitor situation and you combine your advanced security stack with your actual MSP offering, immediately when you do this and you show these numbers, you are put on your heels. You are going into sales mode because you have to now explain to the prospect why your product is better. Whenever you do that, you put yourself in a spot where you have to sell. Nobody likes selling. We already saw the hands. There's 3 of you guys that actually enjoy this shit. So the bottom line is, if you don't want to sell, make sure you separate these out. And the reason for that is because when you go in and you have a proposal that looks like this, they can compare your essential IT or your basic managed services offering and the basic managed services offerings that they're getting from other people. And then your total is higher, but it's very easy for them to see and ask questions, and then they're buying, which is a different conversation than selling. Why is this so important? Because everybody you meet with, guys, is on a security journey between basic needs and security minded. And that means you have folks that are going to show up on the basic needs side of the house, and you could do 2 things with that person. The first one is you can tell them to go screw themselves and like find somebody else. Or the second one is you can work on moving them over to being security minded like the rest of your clients. And that takes time, and that takes a little bit of educational effort on your side. So it's best to get them signed on an agreement and start that educational process so that you can move them over to your advanced security stack. The other thing that I'm assuming is that you have a model year on your advanced security stack. Why is this? Robin talked about this from stage yesterday. There's a buying cycle when it comes to everything. Okay, let's just talk about this for a second. So a buying cycle, what does that mean? That means every so often I'm gonna buy something new. For instance, a new car, right? What's the buying cycle for a car? Well, in my case, a buying cycle for a car is the difference between a new car and an old car. And what's the difference between a new car and an old car? About 48 months in my world. And now I know some of you guys are like 10 years, but that's not me, okay? 48 months is me. Now, if I have a brand new BMW and I just bought it, and you come up to me and you say, hey, I got this thing called a Tesla and it's really cool and Elon Musk is about to buy Twitter or whatever you have to say about it. I'm not interested. I don't care. It doesn't matter how cool it is. It doesn't matter if you sell it to me on a discount. It does not matter because I love my new car. The same goes for managed services. When it comes down to it, there's a buying cycle for managed services, and it's between 36 and 48 months. It's usually about when somebody's doing a major project. And the reason for that is because that's when that new shiny MSP that they really love turns into that a-hole that can't deliver a project on time. Okay, so for those of you who are providing MSP services, that's something to think about. Like, we gotta make sure we're managing our clients, especially at that 36 to 48 month mark, because that's when they're getting a little antsy and they're thinking that we're not so shiny. For the rest of you that are looking for prospects, that's when your attack is the best. So, why is this all important? Well, if you define the buying cycle for cybersecurity, you have this great opportunity. Because everybody's used to, at this point, buying managed services. We all know what managed services are. Everybody out there knows what managed services are. But when it comes down to it, they don't have security stacks right now. And so if you add a model year and you start incrementing that model year every year, all of a sudden, you're indicating to them that this is an annual buying cycle, which is better for you because you can increase the different tools that you have in your stack. You can go down one of these hallways and pick the right vendors to add to your stack as you go versus trying to get the stack perfect to begin with. And by the way, there's no perfect in security. Okay, so we're gonna cover 3 things today, guys. Now that we got the basics under control, we're gonna talk about using inertia. Then we're gonna jump in and talk about overcoming objections, and then we're gonna talk about getting that commitment. Okay, so those are the 3 things we're covering today. Let's jump in and talk about inertia. So first off, what the heck is inertia? Well, according to the Wikipedia place, inertia is this: a body at rest, it remains at rest, and a body at motion, it remains in motion and at a constant speed in a straight line unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. You guys didn't realize that we're going to talk physics today, did you? So what do I really mean here? Well, if I roll a marble down a little ramp, what happens? It speeds up, right? If I roll it up a ramp, what happens? It slows down. This is because of inertia. Well, if I just roll it across a straight path, it just kind of keeps going and going and going until it runs into something. And so if we look at this in a little bit more Bruce speak, what we're talking about here is if you're at rest, you tend to stay at rest, and if you're moving, you keep moving unless you run into something, right? And that's like the premise for every single cartoon that we ever watched as kids. So how does this apply to sales? Well, there's this thing called buyer inertia. And here's how it works. You see, a buyer at rest tends to stay at rest. Me with my car. I love my car. I'm not ready to move from my car until something happens, right? Then, once something happens, and we, like all of us, we can't really control that thing very well. But what we can control is once something happens, now that buyer's moving, and they tend to stay moving unless something stops them, okay? And so what we're gonna be talking about today is clearing the path between the buyer and the commitment. We gotta remove all of the things that stop them because we can't have Wile E. Coyote running into something that stops them from buying. We're not talking about sales, we're talking about a simple process. Who here uses processes to run your business? Okay, 1 or 2 of you, good. That's what we're looking for. So we're talking about a very simple process to go through and close deals. And the other thing that you can do is you can push them once they're moving, which is basically to create an unbalanced force towards the commitment. So we're going to talk about these different 5 things today. Now, you've all seen these 5 things. We have an incoming lead form, a credibility email, phone call, analysis, and then finally a readout, right? So we're going to talk about those things, but we're going to talk about them a little bit differently today because we're going to be talking about using them to maintain inertia and avoid running into something that's going to stop them. Now, one thing that I want to make sure you do, and you don't have to use our tools for this. There's a lot of other vendors that have analysis tools out there, but I want to make sure that you always, always, always use an analysis while you're going through and educating a client and convincing them that the commitment is the right thing. Why is that important? Well, if this goal is the commitment, right? So this goal is the commitment, there's always going to be an objection. Every single opportunity out there, there's an objection. If there wasn't an objection, they would already have reached the commitment. Okay? So why is this so important? Well, when you have an analysis, it goes through and it eliminates those objections. It gives you some tools to do that. And I don't care whether it's a cold lead off the street or maybe it's a referral from your mom, like somebody that really believes in you. Whoever you're working with, I want to make sure that you're clearing the path because there's major benefits here. Our partners report an 83% close rate when they use this process versus going through and winging it. The reason is because it educates, it drives a wedge, and this is a critical piece, driving a wedge between the incumbent and the prospect, and it creates urgency. The other thing that our partners do is they use a third-party assessment. Why is a third-party assessment important? Why is it important that you don't go through and rebrand our reports as your own reports? The answer is because when you go and you analyze your competitor, there's a conflict of interest there. And so if you show up with a third party that's not really part of that discussion, now all of a sudden that conflict of interest is eliminated. Okay, so let's walk through this really quickly. So the first thing that we have is we have the incoming lead form. And what I want this to be is a very simple form. Robin has one on her dashboard that's based on map and it fits right in. So that's available. You can use that. If you're not using Robin's form, you can create your own, but there's a couple things you want to make sure that you're getting. The first one is you want to know why now. Okay? Think about this in inertia. Something got them moving. What got them to move? What got them to pick up the phone and call you? So that's the first question that I want to make sure whoever is talking to this prospect gets. The next thing that I want to make sure that you're doing on this phone call, and this is critical, guys, is you're scheduling your 20-minute phone call right here and now. Why? Because if you don't do that, you're actually creating the obstacle. You're putting the obstacle up, which is scheduling the 20-minute phone call and connecting with that person again. So you can do this by just having a very simple calendar available for your team who's taking that incoming call. It may not be your salesperson, and they can book that 20-minute phone call with your sales team. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to have a credibility email. Robin has a great one, a shock and awe kit. There are a couple things that you want to make sure and work into that. The first thing is at least 3 testimonials, and those testimonials can be on your assessments, and if you're a partner and you'd like a testimonial on our assessments, let me know, we'll get you one. It should include a simple non-disclosure agreement that says, I'm going to take care of your data and I'm going to keep it safe as we go through this. It should also get you ready for that 20-minute phone call. Why? Because if you have a simple NDA, you have a way to communicate to them that we're going to take really good care of your data. And when you start asking questions, which is what happens in that 20-minute phone call, if you haven't already given them an NDA, they're going to put up a roadblock for you. And we're trying to eliminate the roadblocks. So when you start asking questions, you should already have them seen the NDA, and the questions that you're going to ask are simple, and they're going to build anxiety, okay? So what are the questions like? Well, here's a couple example questions. These are in our system. When you go and do a pen test, these are one of the options in there. The first one is like, what type of sensitive data do you folks work with? Do you guys use social security cards? Do you have medical records? Do you have driver's license numbers? Like, what kind of sensitive data do you guys work with? If you haven't signed an NDA, they may not tell you that, or they may get a little anxious even with that. Then you're going to ask them some other questions, like, do you email this type of data, or do you store this type of data in the cloud? And what you're doing right now is you're getting them to think through their risks. You're also learning about their environment. So this has 2 different things for you going on. And during this 20-minute phone call, as you're going here, you're going to go through and start the analysis, okay? During the call, Why? Because if you do it after the call, you've created yourself another roadblock. You have to follow up with them and make sure they do it and da-da-da-da-da. And so you send them the link very simply through email so they see how easy it is to get through their email system. They click the link. We analyze their security for you. And then we return a report within 2 business days. And that allows you to go through and start on the very final piece, which is the readout. Now, you will run into other types of objections, guys. You will run into other roadblocks. So let's spend a couple of minutes talking about those other types of roadblocks you're going to run into, and let's walk through those. So the first one is, I don't want to do an assessment. Who here's ever ran into a client that says, I just want a price, I don't want to do an assessment, right? This is a pain in your rear end. So how do you get over this? Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. And I'm going to share with you why this is important first. So I was talking to one of our partners last Monday, and he might even be in the room here, and he's not. So I was talking to one of our partners last Monday, and he said to me, I'm having trouble closing deals. And I said, okay, what's going on? And he's like, well, I went to this prospect. We met with them. There was a good opportunity. It was about $8,000 a month. And I went through and told them, well, the first thing we're going to want to do is an assessment. And they said to me, well, I don't want to do an assessment. I don't want my current vendor to have any clue that you've been here, and they might get an alert or something, so I don't want to do an assessment at all. And so what he did is he went on site, and he met with them, and he got to know them, and he wrote down a whole bunch of stuff that he found just walking around looking at stuff. And then he sat down with them and gave them a price. And this was completely out of his normal path. And the reason he reached out to me is because they had just contacted him and let him know that they were going with somebody else. So he burnt a lead. He lost an opportunity here. Why? Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, if you're just sitting down with somebody and you're trying to explain to them why you're better than their current provider, what are you doing? You're selling. What do we hate doing? Selling. What do clients hate? They hate being sold. So you're doing all the things that aren't so fun, and you're doing them because you haven't gone through and put them in a spot where you can go through and do what I'm going to show you in a minute. So when you have an analysis, it pushes the prospect over any bumps that they run into. In this case, they said that it was too expensive. So how do you deal with that, I don't want to do an assessment? Well, the first thing that you can do is use the dentist example, okay? Now, some people tell me the dentist example is kind of a bad deal because, they're doing some custom things. So let me walk you through this, the dentist example. The dentist example goes like this. If you go to the dentist, if you go to the dentist right now and you say, I've got some pain in my mouth, they are not going to get the drill out and start grinding away at your teeth. They're going to say, okay, the first thing that we need to do is a quick x-ray, right? They're going to say, I need to look around and I need to understand what's going on with your oral health and why you have this pain. Even if you go to a new dentist, I just recently went to a new dentist and they wanted to do an x-ray. Why? Because they wanted to know what's going on with my oral health before they started recommending what kind of care that I needed for my teeth. What do you think they recommended? They recommended that I get 2 cleanings a year. They recommended that I stop drinking soda and coffee and wine, all the fun things. They recommended, they didn't mention alcohol, so I guess it's probably okay. They recommended a fluoride treatment. They recommended I brush and that I floss. This is their standard recommendation, folks. They did an x-ray to give me their standard freaking recommendation. That's why we want to make sure we're doing analysis, because these guys, they know how to sell really well because they're doing it to us all the time. So if they still don't want an assessment, and you've gone through the dentist example with the x-rays and the pain in the mouth and all those things, if they still don't want an assessment, go through and ask them the questions to establish risk, follow the same process, do the 20-minute phone call. Then we can perform just an external analysis for you, which we'll go through and show you any holes that they have in their firewalls and all of that stuff. So that's one thing that we can do. We can also do a link-free assessment using Wormhole. Some of our partners are like, what is that? I'll show you in a minute. The other thing that you can do is you can, if you go through these different steps, you can actually bring them a report and a readout and go through your normal readout process without having them click a link. So that's the key to making sure that you can overcome, I don't want to do an assessment. And what is Wormhole? So what Wormhole does is it allows you to take like your own laptop, because usually they'll let you bring something in and connect to their Wi-Fi, and you click a special link that we give to you, and it doesn't matter whether they have application whitelisting or any other types of tools. In fact, we even look at Macs and Linux and all that stuff, and we give you a readout of the security posture in that environment, okay? So if that's something you're interested in, you're one of our partners, talk to me. We're only doing this on a beta one-off process for the next 3 weeks, and then we'll be rolling it out to everybody. So if you have an opportunity that doesn't want to go through and do an assessment, shoot me a note. We'll get you through this, and we'll show you how it works, and you'll go out and do one. And then in about 3 weeks, we'll release this to everyone, okay? So moving on. You get to follow the normal process. Why is that so important? Because when you have a normal process, it leads to closing deals. Okay, so there's other objections that come up. This is a really good one and a really important one. We've had our current person for 20 years, and we can't leave them. Who's ran into that before? That'd be like, I've been driving my BMW for 20 years, and I'm shopping. I came here to look at a Tesla, but I'm just not ready to leave my BMW. And so what can you do here? Well, there's a couple things. The first one is you can provide them your advanced security stack only. Okay? So you just sold $47 a month advanced security stack, and now you are in the catbird seat. Because when something goes wrong, you're going to find it because you're monitoring their security, which is great. This also works very well for a co-managed security sale. And if you're interested in how to do the readout from a co-managed standpoint, email me. Just email me, and I'll send you 2 videos that we put together on doing a co-managed readout. This is really important because there's a tremendous amount of opportunity up market right now. And I'm not the only one saying that. You heard Robin say it last night from stage. So email me, and we'll send you over. We've got a couple of videos on this in particular. The other thing you're going to run into, who's ever ran into an RFP? Oh my God, these were terrible. Like, it took me forever to figure out how to get through these. So here's what you're gonna do. If you run into an RFP, do not fill it in and walk away and submit a price. Do not do that. Perform the analysis, follow the exact same sales process that we just went through, eliminating those obstacles, and then you're gonna meet with the person in person. Okay, you're actually gonna meet with them. You're going to learn how they are going to decide. Okay, you're going to just ask them, how do you guys decide on this? They may not have a plan. If they don't have a plan, talk to them about it. Learn. Because this is going to be a critical piece of how they make their decision. And then finally, you're going to perform your readout, and you're going to share your findings, which allows you to build trust and create value. Okay, so that's how you handle an RFP, and we're getting to a spot where we're actually seeing like a 50% close rate on RFPs doing it that way. So I know that works. I know people are like 50%. RFPs are usually written for somebody else, so that's actually pretty good. Okay, so the next one, this is too expensive. Well, they're not ready to buy. What they're telling you when they say it's too expensive isn't, hey, go rejigger all of your numbers. It's that they're not ready to buy. And what you can do in this case is you can ask them a simple question. You can say, how do you know your current vendor is actually addressing these issues? And then you sell them an ongoing assessment, and we'll go in and we'll analyze their environment on a quarterly basis, and we will provide the results to the prospect. And if they sign off on a little piece of paper, we'll share the results with you. And this is like the wedge that keeps going and going and going and going. And we've had a number of partners have great success with this because by the time they're ready to switch, who are they thinking about? They're thinking about you because you brought them that value. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to talk about is getting the commitment, guys. So we've done all these steps, and now it's time to actually do the readout. And first off, I had a partner tell me that every time he went and did sales, he got so nervous that his face turned red, and that the prospect got nervous too because he was nervous, and it was just this terrible cycle. Guys, this is not sales. What we're going to do here is we're going to educate them. And I remember when I was running my MSP, like I thought that meant educate them on tech. No. The goal here, the goal of this meeting is not to educate them on tech. The goal is not to sell them, it's not to scare them, it's not to bore them, it's not to force them. It's very simple. The big secret is educating them on business outcomes, okay? So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean showing them how hacking works. They don't care, all right? They don't care. It doesn't mean telling them how hacking works. They don't care about that either. It doesn't matter from their standpoint about any of these technical details. What they care about is they care about business impact. So how do you educate on business impact? Well, before I get into that, just a quick question. Does anybody here have a teacher that just completely changed their life? Raise your hand if you can remember back in school of somebody that you really liked that really changed your life, right? A lot of us had that. Why do we still remember that person? Because education provides value. This is why little kids take apples to their teachers. This is why they respect their teachers. And education builds trust. And so, how do you educate prospects on business impact? Well, I've said before from stage, tell stories to provide context. You've heard me say that before. No. This is a big change. And I'm sorry that I took you guys down a wrong path there. I was having a hard time communicating that. Instead, tell stories to illustrate business impact. It's not context they care about. They care about business impact. Because stories are memorable and stories elicit emotion. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing is you need at least 3 stories. Okay, you should have 3 good stories that you can tell at the bar that are interesting to your friends, not just to you or your prospects. And if you start telling a story at the bar and everybody starts talking, that means that you got the wrong story and it's not very interesting, okay? So how do you create a good story so that your friends at the bar actually listen to you? Well, it always starts with a relationship. This reminds me, something along these lines. It has to have an introduction. It has to have a who, current state, what happened, business outcome, and relate back to a finding. Very simple, okay? What does that mean? Well, let's just take a quick look at a story. A famous architect designed a library. It was perfect, but every year the library would sink a couple of inches more into the ground. Eventually, the building was condemned. He forgot to plan for the weight of the books, okay? Who? Famous architect? Current state, building was perfect. What happened? The building sank. Business outcome, the library was condemned. Relate to the findings. Well, he forgot the weight of the books, okay? So, think back to when you were in school. Did the teachers, the really good teachers, did they get up and tell stories to you? No, they didn't. They didn't just tell stories to you. How do you learn the best? Well, if I tell you, that's one thing. But if I show you, or if you do it yourself, that's when you learn the best. So if you create an experience for your prospect where you email them the link, they see it go through the email system, they click the link. Now this is why you can't have somebody on the help desk click the links for you, or you can't just run this through an RMM. Then once the analysis is done to the network, they realize a couple of things. First off, we didn't have passwords to their environment. We don't run their environment, so we don't have that kind of access. And all they did was click a link. So that creates the experience. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to let the report do a little bit of work for you. When this report shows up, and you open this up and you show this to them, that's a shocking moment for them. Okay, so we let that experience set in. Then the question for you guys, this is not part of the readout. Don't ask this to them. Don't say which would freak you out more. If I told you about somebody that could crack your passwords, or I showed you somebody cracking your passwords, what's going to freak you out more? It's going to be the actual passwords getting cracked, right? The same goes for them. So when you show a page like this, you let that set in for a moment, okay? You show this to them, you say, look, we cracked passwords, we were able to get in. Then you tell the story to illustrate the business impact. One of the things that we're seeing is people going through and just starting the story without giving a moment for them to understand, to fully understand what happened. Then we bring the story around. So remember, link it back. Who, current state, what happened, business outcome, relate finding. Example. This reminds me of a partner at an accounting firm. They thought they had everything lined up. They thought they were safe. And hackers were able to go through and submit 180 fraudulent tax refunds. Okay, this is happening right now all the time, guys. And this caused the IRS to suspend their ability to e-file. And all the attacker needed was a password. Okay? That goes through and creates a story that relates back to your findings, and it goes through and illustrates business impact. All right, so then you're going to go to your prospect and you're just going to say, I have a couple of options for you. And you're going to show them your options. You're not going to give them the price yet. You're going to review your agreement. You're going to share with them the things inside of your agreement that people have a hard time with. Maybe you have a 3-year agreement, right? And then you're going to ask the question. You're going to say, besides price, what would stop you from agreeing to work with us? This question, you should write this question down, because what this question does is it finds the obstacles that are left that you don't necessarily know about. Just because they've been smiling and nodding doesn't mean that they've been listening, and it certainly doesn't mean that they've been agreeing. Okay? So if you ask this question and they give you a couple of things, they say, this and this and this, respond, help them understand, educate them on their questions. Then you present the numbers, and you hand them a magic pen. Why do you hand them a magic pen? So every single readout that you ever go on, I want you to take a pen with you. Because when you hand them the pen, this magical pen, it does something. It asks them a question. It says, are you going to sign this freaking deal or not? Okay? You don't have to ask the question. The pen does the work as long as you do this one thing, which is wait silently while they stare at the pen. Okay? This is how a magic pen works. Now, they may say, oh my gosh, I'm not quite ready. I got to talk to my mom before I sign any agreements or whatever. And that's okay. Because the next thing that you want to do is you want to ask them, from this assessment, from the things that we did from you today, did you learn something? Was this valuable? And then you're going to ask them to refer somebody to you. Don't write down what's on the slide. I'm going to tell you what you're going to ask them. And this is really important. You don't say, can you refer somebody to me based on our findings? No. Okay? You say, this ransomware stuff has been crazy. And for you folks in the back, I hope you Googled what ransomware is. This ransomware stuff has been crazy. It's been going off all the time. We've seen a big uptick in it. And I'm concerned about it. And one of the ways that ransomware is getting in successfully is through phishing. People phish their way in most of the time. And successful phishing campaigns come from clients and vendors that you email all the time. I would be happy to do an analysis for one of those. If you have one in particular you can think of that maybe you wire transfer with or you do this type of work with, I'm sure that would benefit from something like this too. And you will get a referral right there on the spot. And you didn't ask for one. What you did is you told them exactly who you help and how it helps them. You told them what's in it for them. Okay, now after you got that referral, we're done, right? Well, no. because I told you that I'd give you the biggest mistakes we see. And I'm gonna run through these guys, so get ready. We see people not having an advanced security stack offering. We see people not performing assessments. We see people not sending a digital shock and awe, not including an NDA. We also see people not scheduling that 20-minute phone call on the original phone call and not scheduling the readout during the 20-minute phone call, both of which create objections, which are those roadblocks that you're running into. We also run into situations where they don't have the person click the link on the call, they don't get the assessment going. We run into situations where salespeople show up not being prepared for the objections I just told you about. We also run up against situations where people aren't following up enough, like they stop following up. Guys, it takes weeks for sometimes people to make a decision. Like, how long did it take you to decide that it was time to buy a new car? And then how long did it take you to actually decide to go out and do that work and get the new car? Because it is work. And in this case, it's work for them too. So following up is critical. The next thing that we see people doing is skipping that crazy spot where they ask for referral. And then finally, we see people not using third-party assessments to sell and not getting a third-party assessment for their own environments. Why is that so important? Because security is changing. Like, everything we do out here is changing. What worked yesterday doesn't work today. I mean, yesterday we might have been defending our front door from a robber breaking in and trying to steal something. But today we're defending against like aliens coming by and trying to suck up all the things that we have in our environments. And when you ask somebody on your team to proofread their own work, you're asking them to try to figure out a hole in a control that they set up, and all they see is the control. I mean, it's like this guy trying to get through this gate that he put on the sidewalk here, right? Like, this is what it looks like when people try to find their own blind spots. So, if you would like to see our solution in action, if you'd like to see if your stack will detect an attacker, if you'd like a free assessment, contact us, www.galacticscan.com/stack. Who else done this? Okay, a lot of folks have done this in the room, guys. And I had somebody that didn't end up buying from us come up to me yesterday and say, I wanted to thank you for going through and doing this assessment. This was the most valuable thing that we've done in our organization in a while. I use it to beat my CIO once in a while, as in like physically beat him with it. So what I'm saying is that you will get value from this, because we're gonna go in, we're gonna analyze your security, we're gonna show you how your tools respond, and we're gonna give you steps that you can take to secure your own MSP. And one of the things that you're probably thinking is, what's the catch, guys? There's no catch. I'm on a mission to help protect 1 million people, and as part of that mission, we're going through and analyzing for free MSP networks. The other thing that I want to mention is if you're not ready for an assessment, or if you're already a partner, we have some things at the booth. First off, we have sample NDAs. It's part of one of the booklets that we have up there, so stop by, grab one of those. We also have sales stories, okay? So if you're running into situations like maybe we broke into M365 and bypassed their multi-factor authentication, and you need a story that goes with that. You can use one of our stories by saying, this reminds me of a situation that our security team ran into, and then it's that same story formula. Okay, so we have a tremendous number of stories because we do a lot of incident response. And then finally, we have a sales checklist. So if you want any of those things, swing by the booth. And the last thing that I want to mention is we do have a couple of copies of Level Up. This was a #1 bestseller in network cybersecurity, so if you want a copy of this, swing by the booth, we'll give you one, and if I'm there, I'll even sign it for you and make it worth something someday. All right, guys, thank you so much. Those are the things that I wanted to cover today. Looking forward to talking to all of you guys.